Thank you, Captain Stewart, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this inaugural SBIA Orange Book event, celebrating 40 years, an in-depth examination of the FDA Orange Book. I'd like to thank today's presenters and panelists for providing their regulatory and scientific expertise, as well as our attendees for their support for this important regulatory program. I'd especially also like to thank the staff, including FDA's Small Business and Industry Assistance staff, that are working hard to make sure everything is running seamlessly online. The Orange Book is an FDA publication mandated under Section 505J7A of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or FD&C Act. As its core function, the Orange Book identifies drug products approved by FDA under the FD&C Act and serves as a regulatory resource for information on drug marketing availability, therapeutic equivalence evaluations, and patent and exclusivity data. Applicants submitting a generic drug application to the agency rely on the Orange Book to identify information required to be included in their application. I'd like to start us off today with some historical background. In 1979, the Orange Book list was proposed as a resource to combat high drug prices and to encourage competition by assisting states in identifying lower-cost, therapeutically equivalent drugs. Throughout the years, Congress and the FDA has sought to amend the publication to maximize its usefulness to stakeholders and to help facilitate generic drug development and market entry to spur competition. There have been several notable statutory and regulatory changes which have significantly updated the Orange Book compared to the version first published on October 31, 1980, including the 1984 Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act, also commonly known as the Hatch-Waxman Amendments, which amongst other things first codified the requirements for FDA to publish and maintain the Orange Book and added patent and exclusivity listings to the Orange Book. 2016 Final Rule abbreviated new drug applications and 505(b)(2) applications, which clarified patent information listing requirements for the Orange Book. And 2017 FDA Reauthorization Act, or FDARA, which added additional requirements to help ensure the accuracy of the marketing status information in the Orange Book. As we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Orange Book's first official publication, the FDA is continuing its efforts to maximize the usefulness of the Orange Book for its stakeholders, including by providing greater clarity around frequently asked questions regarding the Orange Book and by adding more functionality to the online Orange Book. Today's first event will provide an in-depth exploration of the Orange Book as a key reference for applicants submitting a generic drug application to the FDA. We'll also explore FDA guidance and regulations relevant to application holders regarding drug product listings in the Orange Book, marketing status changes, patent listings, and exclusivity. Some of our webinar topics include FDA's Orange Book, a historical review of 40 years, where we'll go back in time to explore the origins of the Orange Book and understand how it has evolved through the years. Orange Book 101, covering the basic content of the Orange Book, including how and when updates are made. Updates to Orange Book patent information, which will discuss changes to patent information, including use code changes and reissued patents. And an overview of therapeutic equivalence, which will discuss the basics of therapeutic equivalence evaluations and provide information on the process for 505(b)(2) application holders requesting therapeutic equivalence evaluations. FDA's Drug Competition Action Plan aims to help remove barriers to generic drug development and market entry in an effort to spur competition so that consumers can get access to the medicines they need at affordable prices. As part of our Drug Competition Action Plan, we are committed to bringing greater transparency to the generic drug assessment and approval process, including through any future enhancements to the Orange Book. We recently solicited feedback from stakeholders and the public on how we may enhance the Orange Book in 2 recent public dockets, including as a general matter and with respect to the listing of patent information in the Orange Book. We appreciate every person who submitted comments to these dockets. Your input provides a valuable additional perspective about which potential features would make the Orange Book more user-friendly. In addition to the public dockets, FDA also recently published 2 Orange Book-related guidances, Orange Book Questions and Answers Draft Guidance, and marketing status notifications under Section 506I of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act Final Guidance. Public comments from the Orange Book dockets and guidances help the agency consider how it may further modernize the Orange Book and otherwise provide tools for stakeholders, including regulated industry, based on current and anticipated needs. These initiatives also aid in the development of generic drug products and further the goal of enhanced generic drug competition. At today's workshop, we would like you to reflect on enhancements that could continue to make the Orange Book most useful to all the different groups that rely on it, including any changes that could help facilitate generic drug development or otherwise adapt the publication to changing environments and demands. I would also like to take a moment to recognize all the tremendous work individuals across the industry and FDA are doing to address the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to keep other key mission-critical initiatives moving forward, supporting public health. Thank you for your efforts and support during this time. Now I have the honor of introducing the Orange Book's own Captain Kendra Stewart.
Good morning, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is an honor for me to be here today at this inaugural event in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Orange Book. The Orange Book, while a publication, is symbolic to the Hatch-Waxman landscape. In this time that I have with you, I intend to explore the Orange Book's 40-year history throughout the prior decades. Together, we'll examine the legislative history that led to the development of the Orange Book and influenced its content. And then we'll visit the Orange Book through each decade and examine it from development to enhancements and finally modernization. At the end of today's presentation, you will be able to understand how the FD&C Act has shaped the development of the Orange Book. In addition, you'll be able to identify significant changes to the Orange Book throughout its 40-year history. So the Orange Book evolved out of several key pieces of drug legislation, beginning as early as 1906. So in 1906, the Food and Drug Act was signed, which established the regulation of food and drugs in the United States and signaled the birth of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Just prior to 1906, the food and drug industries were not regulated, and many sellers advertised cure-all claims for worthless and dangerous medications. Later, in 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed. This act was sparked in part by a disaster that had occurred a year earlier when in 1937, over 100 persons were killed, many of whom were children, after being given a poisonous elixir of sulfanilamide. You see, sulfanilamide was a commonly prescribed antibacterial at that time, and it was reported to have a very bad taste. So to remedy the taste issue, diethylene glycol, which is a chemical analog of antifreeze, also very poisonous, was added to improve the taste, but with disastrous results. So as a result of this incident, the new law required that drugs had to establish safety prior to being marketed. So the law itself applied to newly marketed drugs, but drug products that were already on the market stayed on the market and became known as grandfather drugs. Later, in 1951, the Durham-Humphrey Amendment to the FD&C was passed, and it established the drugs that required a prescription by a licensed practitioner versus those that could be sold over the counter. So in other words, it made the distinction between prescription versus OTC drugs. So in 1962, a near disaster prompted the passage of the Kefauver-Harris drug amendments. Thalidomide, which was at the time being used as a sleeping pill, was found to have caused birth defects to thousands of babies born in Western Europe. While the drug was not approved in the United States at that time, the application had been under review here in the U.S., and the medical officer reviewing it faced increased pressure to approve this application. This near miss helped ensure the passage of the Kefauver-Harris drug amendments to ensure drug efficacy and greater drug safety. So for the first time, drug manufacturers were required to prove to FDA the effectiveness of their drug products before marketing them. And then in 1983, with the passage of the Orphan Drug Act, this allowed FDA to promote research and marketing of drugs needed for the treatment of rare diseases. But relevant to the Orange Book, it provided a 7-year period of orphan drug exclusivity. So a huge milestone moment in the development of the Orange Book was in 1984 with the enactment of the Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act, also known as the Hatch-Waxman Amendments. This act was passed to expedite the availability of less costly generic drugs by permitting FDA to approve applications to market generic versions of brand name drugs without repeating the research done to prove them safe and effective. It also established patents and exclusivities for new drug applications and 180-day exclusivity for certain ANDAs. Other milestone moments included the 1997 passage of the Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act, also known as FDAMA. The FDAMA allowed for repeal of 507, which changed the administrative process for reviewing and approving antibiotic applications. It also allowed for a period of pediatric exclusivity. And then finally, in 2003, the passage of the Medicare Modernization and Prescription Drug Improvement Act, also known as MMA, altered key provisions to the Hatch-Waxman Amendments, namely with respect to 505b2s and ANDAs. So, as a recap, the laws summarized in the prior slides serve not only as interesting history, but also as the basis for the Orange Book. The Orange Book lists drug products approved in the United States that have been declared both safe and effective for use. The Orange Book also summarizes drug products that can be substituted with therapeutic equivalence ratings. It publishes both new drug applications and abbreviated new drug applications, and delineates the marketing status between prescription, OTC, or for non-marketed products, the discontinued section of the Orange Book. In addition, a list of patents and exclusivities related to the approved drug products is also included. So the Orange Book was originally proposed in 1979. The publication itself was intended to combat high drug prices by encouraging the substitution of drug products. Prior to the publication of the Orange Book, individual states would reach out to the FDA to get information about substitutability. The agency recognized that it would be beneficial to provide a single list of all prescription drug products that were approved by FDA for safety and effectiveness, along with the therapeutic equivalence determinations for each multi-source prescription product. So, on January 12, 1979, the FDA published in the Federal Register a notice of its intent to make this list available and to provide a copy of the proposed list for comment. So, some general considerations that the agency had at the time in the publication of the Orange Book included to promote public education in the area of drug product selection, to provide information and advice to state and federal health agencies, physicians, and pharmacists about the availability of drug products, and to foster containment of healthcare costs by identifying drug products that were less costly and could be substituted for the innovator product. So the Orange Book was finalized on October 31st in 1980, and the formal name is the Approved Drug Products with Therapeutic Equivalence Evaluations. And so you may be asking yourself, why does it have the name Orange Book? Well, the publication itself was finalized on Halloween of 1980, and therefore it was decided to give the publication an orange cover and was therefore nicknamed the Orange Book. And so with that, let's take a look at this challenge question. Which amendment to the FD&C Act caused the addition of patents to the Orange Book? Was it A, the Durham-Humphrey Amendment, B, the Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act, C, the Kefauver-Harris Drug Amendments, or D, the Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act? So the answer is B, the Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act, which is also known as the Hatch-Waxman Amendments. So now, let's take a look at Orange Book development through the decades and how amendments to the FD&C Act have been impactful to that change. So, starting off in the time period between 1980 to 1989, a period that I have creatively dubbed the decade of Orange Book development. This decade included the first official publication of the Orange Book. And as you can see here, here's a copy of the first cumulative supplement, which is the Orange Book's monthly printed publication. Here's a copy of that shown here. It's the first edition of the first cumulative supplement in 1980. Although the Orange Book had been published prior to Hatch-Waxman, passage of the Hatch-Waxman Amendments proved pivotal to the Orange Book. Included in the enactment of the Hatch-Waxman Amendments was the requirement that the FDA make publicly available a list of approved drug products with monthly supplements. So in other words, it included a statutory mandate that the FDA publish the Orange Book. And that requirement can currently be found under 505J7A of the FD&C Act. Furthermore, in response to the enactment of Hatch-Waxman, new information began to be included in the Orange Book starting in 1985 with the 6th edition of the Orange Book annual publication. And in that year, FDA began including discontinued drug products in the Orange Book. The FDA also added to the Orange Book a list of OTC drug products that had been approved in NDAs or ANDAs. Additionally, this edition included the first patent and exclusivity addendum. So let's take a look at the next decade between 1990 and 1999, which I have nicknamed the decade of regulatory compliance. For the Orange Book, this was the decade in which the FDA continued its implementation of policies in response to the Hatch-Waxman amendments. As these policies were rolled out, the Orange Book was being continuously updated in response. So let's take a look. In 1992, after the issuance of the final rule for abbreviated new drug applications, the Orange Book began identifying the reference listed drug. Then, in 1997, after the passage of FDAMA, pediatric exclusivity was added to the Orange Book. Finally, in the sign of those times, in 1997, the agency introduced the first Orange Book website to more readily disseminate information to the public. So now let's move on to the period of 2000 to 2009, which I've dubbed the decade of technological advancement. So while 1997 started the publication of information on the Internet, the Orange Book was significantly modified during the time between 2000 to 2009, when in 2003, the FDA started publishing an indicator as to whether a listed patent contained drug substance and/or drug product claims. Additionally, in 2005, the FDA made copies of the Orange Book available for download off of the Orange Book's website. Of the agency's website. Then, in the same year, the FDA switched from publishing patent listings in a public docket to publishing them daily in the Orange Book. And finally, the FDA switched from publishing generic drug approvals monthly to publishing them daily. So the next period between 2010 to 2019 is the period that I've dubbed the Orange Book expansion and transparency. This decade began a period of significant expansion and changes for the Orange Book. So in 2014, with the reorganization of the Office of the Generic Drugs, the Orange Book staff became a part of the Office of Generic Drug Policy and joined the Division of Legal and Regulatory Support. In 2015, the FDA released the Orange Book Express app, which was one of the first few apps released by the FDA. Then in 2016, the FDA redesigned the Orange Book website to include commonly used features on the homepage and to allow users to better navigate the Orange Book and customize the search. And this had been the first significant update since the 1997 rollout of the original Orange Book website. In 2016, the FDA issued a final rule to implement Title 11 of the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003, also known as MMA. So 2017 turned out to be a big year for the Orange Book website. First, FDA revised the Orange Book so that drug listings now clarify which listed drugs are RLDs and which are reference standards. In addition, the FDA clarified the products in the discontinued section that could serve as RLDs. In addition, the FDA revised the Orange Book to include the patent submission dates of those listed patents where that information was available. Also in 2017, the FDA added the patent listing dispute list to the Orange Book website, which informs stakeholders whether a patent listing dispute had been submitted to FDA and whether the NDA holder had timely responded to the patent listing dispute. And then furthermore, in 2018, the FDA updated the Orange Book to include descriptions indicating which indications were protected by orphan drug exclusivity. And so that brings us up to the year 2020, the decade of Orange Book modernization. So this current phase of modernization, the FDA has already published a guidance titled the Orange Book Questions and Answers, which dealt with frequently asked questions pertaining to the Orange Book and fully described some of our internal practices as well as policies associated with the Orange Book. In addition, earlier this summer, the FDA published 2 Orange Book related dockets requesting public comment, first on the general publication of the Orange Book and asking questions related to, who uses the Orange Book and the usefulness of TE codes. And then finally, the FDA published a docket requesting additional feedback on the patent information located in the Orange Book. All right, let's take a look at this challenge question. In what year was the Orange Book modified to clarify which applications were reference standards versus those that were reference listed drugs? Was it A, 1992, B, 2017, C, 1994, or D, A and C? And the answer is B, 2017. So, along with modernizing the Orange Book website and structure, we've also expanded our staff to handle the increasing volume and complexity of work in the Orange Book. However, we know that we wouldn't have been as successful as we've been without the staff that came before us. And with that, I'd like to give my sincere thanks to former Orange Book long-term staff, including Don Hare, Harvey Greenberg, and Marianne Holloway, who are shown from left to right on the top row. We're very fortunate to still have the expertise of Marianne, and she will be presenting later on in this conference in her current capacity as a 505(b)(2) specialist. Additionally, we remain very fortunate to still have on our staff Iris Johnson, Robert Reinwald, and Derek Page, who are shown from left to right on the bottom row, and continue to be valuable members of the Orange Book staff. And here's a picture of our current Orange Book staff, some of which you'll be hearing from later on today. And shown from the top, from left to right, is Trong Kwok, Kun Shin, Tremaine Davis, Derek Page, Rachel Thomas, myself, Kendra Stewart, Alicia Chen, Camille Smith, and then on the bottom row is Bob Reinwald, Iris Johnson, Timothy Kim, and finally Alicia Jeffries. So in summary, amendments to the FD&C Act have shaped the contents of the Orange Book publication. Throughout the last 40 years, the FDA has continuously sought to enhance the utilization of the Orange Book and increase the transparency of the information therein. As part of FDA's Drug Competition Action Plan, we are committed to bringing greater transparency to the generic drug review and approval process, including through any future enhancements to the Orange Book. We will consider the input provided to our recent public dockets as we consider how we may further enhance the Orange Book to optimize its usefulness for our stakeholders and the public. So I really want to thank you for sharing this historical review of 40 years of the Orange Book. Hopefully, over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, you will find this conference full of valuable information that you'll be able to have a better understanding of the Orange Book and apply that in your day-to-day work. Thank you so much.